Thank you so much for joining. We're very excited to have you here. So I'm going to do just a very quick introduction for you guys, and then if you wouldn't mind giving them just a little background on yourselves. So Emily, you join us from Red Hat. I know you're a chief architect there. Do you want to just give a few minutes on yourself?
Yeah, no problem. So yes, as you said, I'm a chief architect with Red Hat, and for the past 10 years, I've been focusing on digital disruption and digital transformation with my clients. And really, I've enabled customers across industries to look at their organization and look at their own work in a different light to encourage collaboration and minimize the blame culture that persistently exists within IT. And so I look forward to this conversation, and I thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you very much for joining us. Bob Claybrook, joining us from the emergency. I'm sorry, I get feedback there. Okay, Bob, you joined us from Emergence of Tech. Do you mind giving a little background on yourself?
Yes, coming from the client side and been technology as an executive for 25 plus years, now focused from a value added or technology provider perspective. So really been through many events in my career, however, nothing like this. So looking forward to the conversation and happy to meet you all.
Thank you again for coming. Marcus, you join us from Darktrace. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Marcus Fowler. I'm the Director of Strategic Threat at Darktrace, artificial intelligence company focused on cybersecurity. I spent the last 23 years in security in the public sector, last 15 at the CIA, where I was focused on operations, nation states, and counterterrorism.
Very good. And James, you join us from the HPE. You mind giving us a little bit background?
Correct. Thank you for having me. I've been with HPE since December. I'm a technologist doing cybersecurity and kind of creating an overlay, customer facing, having those kind of conversations and helping salespeople sort of know how to have that. Prior to that, I was 22 years FBI working cybercrime, nation states, as well as cyber criminal activity, and 8 years military before that. So I've kind of been doing IT a long time, but I was a kind of a junior programmer back in the day, doing COBOL and Pascal, Fortran, teaching myself those things back in the 80s. So.
Very good. All right, Ron, I know you have our first question lined up.
Yeah, so obviously, guys, we're going to be very focused today on being technology driven, on folks being business focused, on us being human powered as a society. But did want to start, given the panel, a little bit on the security side of things. Given the current landscape and given where we're going, what do you guys see the threat landscape looking like, and what do you think folks should be cognizant of in this kind of new normal, this rush out to have this remote workforce as we're all living through? So Marcus, I think I'm going to start with you on that one.
Sure, and I certainly think what we've realized, where we've gotten a good idea about now, is some of the dependencies, some of these critical dependencies that maybe we weren't as cognizant of prior to it, and vulnerabilities. On the cyber side, certainly spear phishing, we've seen that only spike through the roof. That's a normal attack vector. I think vulnerability in the cloud and SaaS space, as well as people now thinking about their VPNs and what does at home mean. As we moved into the crisis and you saw everyone kind of have to sprint to that work from home, a lot of companies, readily so, put business operations ahead of security, and then you watch security try and catch up and figure out what they needed to be doing and those types of things. In the next normal, right? So where we're at now, but in the next normal, whatever that is in terms of return, I would love for companies to take that pause and not sprint back, right? Because think about this next kind of spike of vulnerability, spike of opportunity, phase it back. You have the opportunity, whatever you do next, to implement it in a way that security is partnered and lashed up very well rather than catching up. So I would be very cognizant of that being another time of vulnerability, anxiety, and then being able to kind of move back from there. So that would be one of my recommendations.
And James, kind of same question, security as a general topic, and your thoughts about where we are and where we're headed.
Yeah, I agree with Marcus completely. I think, when you're in the middle of crisis, you just try to keep business going. And so it was very interesting to see sort of how companies reacted. Some companies didn't react, and of course, they ended up kind of being shut down. I think as we come on the other side of this, there's a lot of lessons learned from a security standpoint. I was actually just reading a report from Alliance Cybersecurity. It said 1 in 5 companies transition to remote work without having a clear policy about cybersecurity. They had no clue about what they were doing, and so now their people are distributed further to the edge. And one of the things we always talk about in cybersecurity is that your security is only as secure as the least secure network you connect to. Now we have, rather than it used to be BYOD and everybody bringing their own phones, now it's bringing their own computers into your network. And so whether it's VPNs or Citrix's, Citrix access points, you have now taken these home networks, which in many cases have no security, no endpoint, or anything, and they're now part of your network. And I think as we transition into more of this remote workforce, companies are going to have to start coming up with an idea of how do I push some sort of cybersecurity client, whether it's clientless or client, out to these remote workers, and make sure I keep my stuff and my data secure, because that need isn't going to change. And what's funny is in the middle of all this, we saw the SEC come out with more cybersecurity requirements. We saw New York State come out with a new privacy, law. Those privacy and security conversations have to start being had earlier. And I think now is a beautiful time. And I tell every company I talk to, keep a notebook of what you're going through right now, because it's like when your kids were little. We all remember when our kids were little that it was a horror story. I didn't get any sleep for 6 weeks, but years later we romanticize it and think, oh, it wasn't that bad. We've got a lot of lessons we can learn. Let's make sure we learn them and remember them, so if something does happen in the future, we're a little bit more prepared.
Thank you
one
for that
thing,
insight,
I love the fact that I love Emily's comment on the blame culture in IT, by the way. That's great. But one thing, I appreciate the fact we started with security, because I have a true appreciation, and I appreciate the fact that gentlemen like you are keeping us safe, to be quite honest with you. So it's never been a primary focus of mine, but I understand it and I appreciate it. And Marcus, your point on going forward is the exact point that we should all be focusing on, what we've learned and where we are, and don't recoil back. And as far as BYOD and VDI and software defined everything, that's what I'm all about, and that's what my focus is today. So from a digital loss prevention perspective and things like that, it's great to keep things inside the house, so to speak, and at the same time providing a safe environment for business processes and such. So, Emily, you want to take the next shot?
Yeah, so kind of taking it from a little bit different angle, but going off of what Marcus said in terms of not going 3 steps back. In terms of application development, we were just starting to scratch the surface with getting developers to actually think about security when they're developing code. And so the one thing I really don't want to see from my clients is, oh, we're all back to work. Okay, let's start innovating again. And then they'll kind of forget all that progress we just made over the last 3 to 5 years of getting people to actually think of, hey, don't just download this random jar file from Apache. Maybe run it through a CVE check before you do that. Take it from a whitelist, from the corporate repo, things like that. And so one thing I want to make sure that we really do as kind of an IT organization is make sure to think of security first from every single person within IT. And that's something that we really don't want to run back from and put security at the last gate again.
Well, I think we have a golden opportunity here to really make it the primary now, right? By the lessons we learned. And so as we recreate workflows, I think that's going to be a big thing going forward, is everybody's going to look at what their workflow is and how do I recreate it. It's a beautiful time when you're re-engineering a workflow to engineer security at the core, versus what we did a lot of times in the past was we took old workflows prior to IT and sort of shoehorned them into IT, kind of shoehorned in. So now I think as we recreate the workflow, I think we have a golden opportunity to make security at the underlie.
Love that.
No, just to jump on that, I think that's a fantastic point, and it's so hard to get a company to re-engineer a workflow, right? Because it's working, and it might not be working efficiently and certainly not rarely working securely, but it's working. And, I think too often security, especially when you think about innovation, it's seen as like that obstacle. Like I'm gonna get them to check the box at the end, and it's gonna be they're gonna kind of be not the greatest partner, but eventually I'll make some sacrifices and it'll be secure enough and it'll go out the door. Where if you have security, if you have security in the room, at the minute you start to innovate, the minute you start to do that development, right? Not only will you have a more secure product, you might actually innovate very differently because you have somebody with a different optic in the room that can provide, value add or recommendations. I always worry that security is that add-on of innovation, especially when you talk about apps and them rushing out the door, whether it's a voting app or the contact tracing apps. You know, what's going to happen there in terms of security and how fast those go out the door. I think bringing security in as a partner earlier really is going to help in a number of different ways, but there's still a lot of hesitancy around it.
Well, and that's what's kind of cool about innovation is we look at the companies right now that have been successful or have been somewhat successful in going through this crisis. And I kind of talk about, 3 years ago, a lot of grocery stores weren't doing curbside. A lot of grocery stores weren't doing, delivery type stuff. And how many restaurants were using anything beside their own delivery drivers? And so things like Uber Eats and Favor here in Texas have kept a lot of those companies in line. But with that, like I was talking to one restaurateur, and he said that prior to this, 10% of his stuff was delivery through Uber Eats. Now it's 70%, and he can't afford the premium that they charge. So you're going to see, I think you're going to see more companies in that service industry, especially. And I've been kind of blogging about cybersecurity in the service industry and SMB. You're going to see a lot of innovation in how do I make that work differently. And it's kind of neat because even things like churches, we had a Catholic priest out here in the Houston area that was doing a confession from a chair in the parking lot. And so people would pull up and he was blindfolded and he'd take their confession. And it was neat, but it was a way of innovating. Even the most basic thing that we do, I think, has those kind of innovation, and it really is going to resonate going forward.
James, to that point, you think about things like telehealth and how things are changing so quickly. And with an unemployment rate that is since the Depression, we haven't seen since the life of the Depression, it's going to be interesting to see what new roles and opportunities are created for people and to play back into your security roles and what you're seeing out there. It's going to be interesting to see what new paradigms that we have to deal with, or specifically from a security perspective. So, well, I think it's going to be a very interesting time. Desperation creates new opportunity. So
we had predicted last year that more robotics would come into play. And I think you'll see more RPA type stuff pushing in, especially when we look at, like, right now, the meat processing. And meat processing has always been very, human driven, but because of that, the outbreaks there, I think you're going to start seeing some more of that robotic processes start leaking into places that maybe we never saw it before. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Robots and RPA, unfortunately, are going to go the wrong direction, but I 100% agree with you. It's, from a business perspective, we're going to see it, not to create too much optimization, but from a resiliency perspective.
Right.
Yeah, and I think Marcus kind of, when he brought up contact tracing, it made me think about kind of why we even care so much about security. And really, it comes down to customer trust. And as our employees continue working remote, we need to have that trust throughout the entire life cycle. And so really that's why security is so important, is because we need the full life cycle to be trusted.
Well, what's interesting about that is, did you see the article now that some employers are trying to figure out how they can measure productivity of their remote workforce? And they're trying to figure out when people are online. And it's like, I got to make sure I get my 40 hours out of you. So I'm going to monitor your Zoom connections and make sure that you're online. And it's like, but that's completely defeating the purpose of remote working. And it's sort of that over the top thing. It's just silly. It's just, that's going to backfire.
Yeah, what value, to your point, what value are you generating from that information? If you're talking about system availability and flexibility and things like that, or resiliency, right, to make sure the applications and solutions are available, that's fine. But to micromanage, those days are past at the end of the day.
They should be past, I'll say.
Yeah, and I'd like to add a follow on to this. This has been a real great conversation, guys. And Marcus, I'll come back to you a little bit. We talk a lot about the systems that businesses can provide, the automation businesses can provide. What about the human aspect of this, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the people who have to consume that or live with those security things. Can you talk a little bit about the human side of this?
Sure. I mean, first, and kind of some of the points that have already been made, it is, what leaders do right now, right? You either have the opportunity to really make a lot of emotional, political, and trust investment in your people and get a lot of it, or have it depleted completely because you're not doing the right things by them, right? And whether it's communication, well, again, communication would be the big one, right? But also transparency, awareness, engagement, trying to get that person those 40 hours when, I don't know about all of you, but I have a second grader and a fifth grader, and trying to get 40 hours out, my full day while I'm trying to get them on Zooms and get them educated is not easy, but I can still be just as productive, right? If I know how to manage my time and I know how to do it. So I think, there's amount of trust, and it goes both ways. And I think from the security standpoint, we have to be fair in terms of how we judge, or how much we think about the human as one of those lines of defense, right? Because everyone has those spear phishing trainings and everybody does that, but they're getting so good, right? The spear phishing operations, they're getting so novel, and they're only going to start to get more supercharged as people use machine learning and AI, and they're adapting. They are getting so subtle that to overly punish or over rely on the human is really unfair to them, right? I think they're part of it. You need to have that. You need that training. It's still important, right? But right now, when they went to their homes, all that anxiety, all that starving for information in terms of what's happening within their state, their environment, their schools, their company, their job, they're gonna click on things, right? And that can't be your layer of protection. It should be one, right, but it cannot be the one. And I think that managing expectations of what we want our employees to be able to represent in that security construct is important. It needs to be, managed appropriately.
Yeah, and it's all about
Marcus,
that holistic security, right? So it's all of it. It's not just people. It's not just processes. It's not just product. It's all of this sort of built in the culture. And so I think Marcus is spot on with that. Is that, yeah, don't be beating people up, because people are, first of all, cyber criminals will never let any crisis go unpunished. They're always going to use a crisis to try to make money. I mean, that's just their nature. I just read where they were talking about somebody's going after Gilead. Some Iranian hackers went after Gilead because they may have a cure, brewing. That's a huge lucrative spot. It's just always going to be that case. So people, yeah, we got to understand that as people go remote, you're going to see two things happen. Some companies are going to understand it. They're going to be very, understanding. They're going to start remotely managing their workforce. The rest, some are going to be more draconian about it and kind of stay in that older paradigm. And I think what's going to happen there is that when unemployment starts to come back down, those companies will lose all their people. Nobody's going to, a lot of people aren't going to quit a job right now just because there's some sort of security. But I think long term, you're going to see some sort of kickback from that says, I don't want to work for this company if this is the way you're going to treat me when things go bad.
Very good.
Hey guys, I know my picture's gone, but I'm still here, just so you realize it. And one thing I was going to ask Marcus or James, as we all start to work at home, we take responsibility for ourselves. What are your firms doing to help individuals? I know, I think Marcus, you mentioned the younger children at home and streaming television while we're all stuck at home, while we're trying to have a webinar like this today. All those challenges, but also from the security perspective, or from HPE's perspective, or Marcus, are you guys reaching out and doing anything for the individuals or making things available? I know that MicroStrategies has set up a telehealth line to help the elderly just understand technology. So I'm not sure if we've thought about the individuals, because I think we all need to take responsibility for ourselves and making sure that we're connecting and doing our part versus waiting for leadership to do it for us at the end of the day. So I'm not sure if you guys are putting forth anything in the communities and things like that. So
certainly,
I'll try and get my picture back soon.
So as a company, we tend to work with their companies and their security, but in terms of things that I've certainly spoken to, it's a lot about being vigilant, and it's a lot about cyber hygiene and the basics. For our own people, we just kind of stress the importance of actually using the VPN. We know it can be frustrating. We know it goes down. Using those approved file transfer systems. Don't go out on the internet and just find one that you think works because the company one is down, because we know that those are honeypots for attackers. Don't underestimate those things. If you get an email and you're not sure, reach out another route and ask, hey, did you send me this? Or this is an odd request. Trying to have all of those things measured and approaches pretty straightforward. And again, I think it is truly trying to see where you can provide that layer of security that doesn't rely on the human. I mean, some of my best friends are humans, the other ones are dogs, but the importance really is, trying to build them, build them up to be successful. And by doing that, you need the right tools around them, as well as the right processes for them to ask questions, or to not click on a certain thing, right? If that link that was malware that comes in is already flattened, they can click it all day, right? They can be so eager to get their free Netflix, but it's not going to go anywhere, right? Because I've removed that from allowing them to do that. So I think all of those things are areas that I know we're focused on.
Yeah, I would say from our standpoint,
you know,
two-pronged. Internal employees, there's a lot of communication. We see a lot of kind of, stay the course, we're doing great, a lot of sort of that encouragement, rah, rah, rah moments. Each supervisor is sort of encouraged to do the same sort of thing, to keep in touch with their people, make sure that, they're not feeling overwhelmed and then there is an internal sort of telehealth line. Also externally from a customer standpoint, same sort of thing. We kind of reaching out to the customers and saying, hey, what are your challenges? Like one thing HPE did is is pretty actually somewhat cash rich in that they have a lot of liquidity. So we actually extended like free, financing, like $2 billion of financing to any customer, so that if they want to make some sort of, purchase, don't worry about the money right now. We'll give you a year or whatever to make that payment. So there's a lot of those kind of things that we're trying to do, is sort of, and then, looking, we're doing a ton of webinars and all that kind of stuff, HP's trying to become more focused on the SMB market. So we've deployed more products that are specific to the smaller scales, and whether it's VDI solutions or remote apps or cloud services, all that kind of stuff. So.
Now, Emily, can you add to that? What has Red Hat been doing?
Yeah, so Red Hat's been doing a lot, and IBM has been in the news constantly, so I'm not going to talk too much about them in terms of everything they've been doing for COVID. But in terms of Red Hat for the employees, a big thing has been the telehealth. So that was already part of our plan, but they've really been pushing that. They've been encouraging a lot of mental health days and things like that. Very flexible working hours in general. So we have plenty of people where sometimes they're just like, I just got to take the half day, and no one questions it. And so kind of building up that understanding culture has been really, really important to us as a whole. And then we're also doing a code challenge in terms of investing in open source projects that already exist that are helping with different type of COVID-19 problems. And then we're also doing a call for code challenge for the employees to address different COVID-19 challenges. Like I'm entering it to help for domestic violence, actually. So kind of helping our employees give back as well as giving back directly.
So Emily, I have to comment. You look like you're in a dungeon. So if you're in trouble, blink your eyes a few times, so that we can know and we'll send help. Okay.
So as much trouble as I can.
Hey guys, one just to take it completely out of the box here. Somebody mentioned pets earlier. I think my cat is about ready to move out based on the time he's been spending with me over the past 2 months. It's never happened in his life. So just back to the household and the things that we're seeing. So just sorry to digress there.
No, it's all good.
No, very good. So Ron, do you want to ask the next question, or do you want me to?
Oh, you go ahead, Ben.
All right. So guys, I do have a question. One of the big things that we're constantly working on here at MicroStrategy, we're trying to understand where the puck is going, right, as opposed to where the puck is today. So especially taking into account CIO's perspectives, right, which is always, what's going to be in 24 months. So fast forward 24 months, where do you guys think we're going to be? And what do you think will have changed in IT, complements of COVID-19? Emily, can I start with you on that one?
Yeah, so I would say a big thing will be remote working. I think a lot of office work will no longer be required now that a lot of organizations have realized that their employees are just as productive or more productive than they were in the office. So that is one big thing, and just having to deal with the security aspect of that long term is going to be a feat of its own, which I'm not jealous of the people that have to try to figure that out for the organizations that aren't used to it. So that's definitely a big thing. The other is, I really think automation for the organizations that haven't been focusing on it in the past in a real way, are going to start focusing on it. The companies out there that have had to downsize, and unfortunately through this crisis the ones that have been focused on automation over the last 3 to 5 years are doing okay in terms of their core business because of the fact that they don't need many people to maintain. They were actually using their human capital to innovate. And so as they ramp back up their business, they're going to be able to just accelerate that much more when their people come back. And so I think that is going to be the envy of a lot of organizations because they're going to actually be able to visibly see the difference. And so being able to really automate to maintain and use your human capital to innovate is going to be key in the next 24 months.
Very good.
In the spirit of, to Emily's point on this is a great stress test on the innovation and how they've added resiliency as of late, as we move into a more software-defined world. So I think her point on the human capital side this is a great stress test to look at the positive side of things going forward. But I do think we're going to be more focused on resiliency and obviously software-defined everything, as I said earlier. And really, I would hope that from a leadership perspective that, I think I said it before, that folks would take responsibility of themselves and moving this forward, and because we're all in this together, basically. So, Marcus or James?
Sure. I mean, so first, to kind of build on that work from home, what we're seeing already on the security side or the infrastructure side is more focused on the endpoint, on the devices. What do those devices look like? How agile they are in terms of what environments they need to be in. So how are they thinking about protecting that or getting that telemetry, getting that important data from the endpoint devices? Cloud, I think, is going to continue to grow. Cloud security, those things. One area I really hope is that on the other side of this, there, cyber and data agility and adaptability, right? You shouldn't leave the other side of this and have a pandemic response plan, but you should have a global or regional response plan and understanding, right? And learning those lessons, because there's going to be another one, right? And whether it could be a natural event like the Hurricane Katrina or some of these types of things, right? How are we looking at that in terms of the agility? And does from a security standpoint, do all your tools move with you as you go and learn whatever that new thing is and grow from there and secure from there? Or is it, okay, that I can't use, that's not no use of me right now, but maybe in the future I'll be able to bring it back online. I think there's going to be a lot of value understanding in your normal and in your abnormal business operations, and which one of those, what tools breach both or an enabler in both, and which aren't.
Yeah, and yeah, kind of build on the same thing is I think, companies are going to start looking at that idea of how do I make data and my IT more agile. So I know a lot of companies that because of this, they had to actually take their co-location service and make it a full-blown, business process because they just weren't able to handle the new flows of traffic. I hope, this is since we're looking at the crystal ball, I hope a lot of companies are going to start looking at architecture of their networks and realize that the way their networks were established were probably somewhat outdated. A lot of us set up this north-south data flow, through a traditional firewall, traditional backbone routers, and it just doesn't handle throughput. Whether it's VPN, Citrix, whatever your services are, networks are going to get flatter. They're going to go broader. You're going to see, a lot more east-west, because now there's a lot more access points to the internet. There's a lot more access points to my data. So the term we've always heard is edge. So the data is going to be at the edge. So how do I secure data from the edge into the network? It's all data and information driven. So your data, how do I protect it? So I think you're going to see more, DLP type stuff of how do I, when I produce something, and this is kind of something that I've been working on, is how do I produce something like on a camera and immediately encrypt it and upload it into a cloud space, and then the decryption is handled at a different level and managed differently. So we're going to start to see more of those ideas of decryption, encryption at a workflow level, I think. So it's going to move up the stack versus bulk encryption. So I think you're going to see more companies looking at how do I secure that data, and then absolutely the remote workforce. I think the numbers I saw it was somewhere between 5 and 10% prior to COVID. Right now it's about 75. I think it's going to settle somewhere about 45 to 50% of workforce will work from home in the post-COVID world. But the number of people working will be less because they're going to start the number of each company because they want to get liquid. And I think a lot of companies have realized that they were caught not being very liquid and able to handle and not having cash on hand to manage these kind of crises. And I think you're going to see companies trying to regain a little bit more of that liquidity.
Yeah, James, I think that's great insight. These are, complex things to try and answer. I know we've talked a lot here about security. I'd like to talk a little bit about resilience, about, future proofing. I mean, there's a lot of unknown, the recurring theme with a lot of conversations is the unknown. So, how do customers kind of navigate that unknown future? How do they future proof themselves, get themselves more resilient? Emily, what are your thoughts on that side of things?
Yeah, so actually I've been thinking a lot about this recently. So I know kind of your guys' theme of today is anti-fragility. And honestly, when I first heard the term a couple years back in regards to IT isn't this just resilient future proofing? Like really, what's the difference? And as I've thought more and more about it, I've realized it's actually the word future proofing that I don't like, not anti-fragility. Anti-fragility is far more concise about what we should be talking about for actually making you future proof. And this is the reason why. So when someone first hears future proof, I feel like they first kind of think of baby proofing because that's the most common term. And so baby proofing, you protect your house so that the baby doesn't get hurt. Well, if you protect your house from the future, then you're preventing change in the future. And I think that's really where anti-fragility becomes key, which is you are allowing yourself to accept change and to be a part of that change, to be a part of that disruption in the future. And I think that's really what's key. Is everyone was so amazed when Netflix came out with Chaos Monkey, but very few people truly learned from what that really meant. And I think this crisis will help IT organizations truly understand what anti-fragility should mean to them.
Yeah, Emily, that's a great point. If we all become hermits right now and we stay inside, and you think about just the medical side of things, and you don't go outside and experience the spring weather and things and build your normal antibodies, we'll be in much worse shape. I mean, I've always looked at anti-fragility as, absorb the blow, whatever the blow is, and obviously this is significant, what's upon us, but then adjust and go forward, right? And I think Mark has started this out with talking about moving forward from what we've learned. To me, that's what anti-fragility is. You take the hit and you absorb it. You don't let it knock you down, and you get up and keep going in the new direction. It might seem a new direction, but and I think in this case, this pandemic is definitely sending us a new direction, and we are going to work differently going forward. So.
Well, it's the old thing of, like, I was the youngest of 5, and so my story is always that I learned from how my older siblings got in trouble. So we have an opportunity here to learn from other companies as to what worked and what didn't work in order to get to that anti-fragility. So for example, I was at a drive-through restaurant, and right next to the restaurant was a closed down restaurant. And I said, why didn't that restaurant start selling food to the people in this drive-through? Because the one is an ice cream place and the other one's a taco place. They don't compete against each other, but there's a huge opportunity there to stay in business and leverage location, and so I think that's the questions we have to sort of start putting together is that what will it take? What will it take for me in the future to, so I think what you're going to see is a lot of companies, when they start coming back online, the first question in their mind is okay, so what happens if we go right back into another pandemic? What happens if this second wave hits us? How do I stay alive through that? And I think one term has been called the restaurant apocalypse, but I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the travel industry. And I think the travel industry is going to be the biggest change in the next 2 years. How are airlines going to change their behaviors? How are the cruise ships going to change their behaviors? How are hotels? I heard, for example, that Marriott's talking about they'll put 3 days in between when somebody checks out and somebody can check into the same room. So think about occupancy rates, and a lot of what we've learned from numbers, all of that has to start being different, and it has to be a change of our minds and a change of kind of what we think we should be doing, and instead say, what do I need to be doing?
Great points by everyone. And in fact, as you all were thinking, I recognize that our focus was on the anti-fragility and the resiliency of that company. But what about the companies that they're partnering with and the dependencies? In cyber, we often think about third-party risk, right? Your cyber risk is my cyber risk, and that's very high. does that now change with your resiliency or non-resiliency risk? Is my dependency risk, right? Do I ask on the other side of this, how did you weather and what lessons did you learn and how are you going to prevent disruption again from the COVID-19 event? And do I want to partner with you? Because eventually you're going to be in the, in the bunker together, as it were, you hope, and you hope you have someone who's a value add and not a weak point or a stress point within your own network of your own dependencies, right? Because it's broader than just, what you as a company can do. It's what you and your network of companies need to be doing to maintain, your business operations.
Well, it's supply chain,
Yes,
right? I mean,
yes.
so it absolutely is that idea of your, I think you're absolutely right. I have to make sure part of my anti-fragility has to be making sure that my supply chain is also resilient, whether it's something like supermarkets and toilet paper, or whether it's whoever, like the food, food processing. I need to help those companies that I rely upon for my business, that they are also going to be able to weather the storm. Otherwise, all of my stuff goes for naught.
Yeah, Marcus, yes, and yes to all your points. And I think the macro point is we're all in this together. So whether as individuals, as companies, or as partners, we got to find the way to, absorb and continue on, basically. So.
And just to that we're in this together, I do hope that as people are, we all are being better about putting out there the lessons learned, right? What we did well, what we didn't. This isn't a, pandemic response should not be a competitive, there is some level of being able to share, crowdsource how we all did, right, to do better, right? Because when the economy's doing well, we're all doing well, right? And we can compete in the normal processes and the normal way of competing. What we don't want is kind of to not be all stronger on the other side of this. For those that survived, there was a reason they did. And the more I think we can project or be out there as talking about it, the stronger as an entire economy will be.
I was going to say another great segue. We're all here today sharing and crowdsourcing information. So I think, Marcus, you just say you want to do this again next month?
Well, I think, but it's exactly. I mean, I've always talked about in the cybersecurity realm is information sharing is key, and we've got whether cybersecurity, we've always said we have to share threats, and I thought I went to RSA this year, and right before RSA, a lot of the cybersecurity companies had created this open sharing initiative for cybersecurity intel, and that's great. But I think what I hope comes out of it, I mean, I think that's part of what we're talking about, is that there is also the ability, and I think small and medium businesses especially, is sharing the kind of information, what worked, what didn't work, and so I don't all have to recreate the wheel. And I think there's, when we look at business continuity planning, I would hope that we will start to see some sort of framework come out of that will help, especially small and medium businesses.
James, that's a great point, because I know I've been familiar with all the cybersecurity sharing that you guys do, but that's a great point to put the content out there and let us share it, and just have the repositories that you guys utilize to stay up to date. And the reality of it is you stay up to date to the minute, if not the hour, on everything that's going on in the cybersecurity industry.
Well, yeah, and I mean, information sharing groups have been kind of that thing. I mean, oil and gas has done it great. They've got a great group running out of the Houston area, but a lot of other industries have been a little bit more lackluster in sort of getting those information sharing groups going.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes left to the panel.
Thank you,
All
Kelly.
right, so we have about 5 minutes left. We'd like to hear some final thoughts from all of you. I mean, some of the things that I wrote down that I heard a lot of, we talked about security, we talked about automation. Where do you guys think the next steps are, and what messages would you like to leave coming out of this? Emily?
Yeah, so I think my main message is really about not recoiling in fear. So we need to really put our best foot forward, and kind of to the whole security point, we need to trust others and enforce that trust. And we need to use human capital appropriately, focus on automation, and truly come out of this looking better, being better, and achieving more.
Very good.
So I 100% agree with Emily just said. And the only thing I would add to it is from a technology perspective, just continue to be software defined. Because I think that, after everything that's happened with COVID, I think that the cloud technologies that we utilize today not only in the public cloud, but in the private clouds or on-premise, have shown very, very well. And I'm very impressed with where we are. And as I said before to Marcus and James, thank you for everything your industries have done for us, keeping us safe as well.
Well, I would
Marcus?
piggyback off that real quick, and I mean, I'll jump in because that's what I do. But I've said, partly what we got to look at is maybe retraining workforce. I mean, we've talked about, for example, we had talked about this is the largest unplanned IT transformation we've ever seen. I mean, it's an emergency IT transformation. And I think in this, we have an opportunity. We've recognized a lot of workforces that are fragile or are going to be somewhat exposed, should something happen. We have huge unemployment numbers. I actually threw this out on my blog. I said, why not use the next stimulus package to retrain people into cybersecurity? We have 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs open right now, even through this pandemic. Why are we not looking at the ability to take people, leverage their desires to work, and use them in workforces that we need that, whether it's the medical community, whether it's security and IT. I think there's golden opportunities here. And I teach school at one of the community colleges locally. And I think that we should see more people coming in and saying, you know what, I want to have a better skill. So why don't we use this as an opportunity to create we'll call it a GI Bill, but for non-GIs, that will allow, some of this stimulus money to actually be used, for something that teaches somebody how to fish versus just giving them some fish right now.
Good idea. Marcus?
Sure. Well, first, I want to say thank you to everybody else on the panel. It's been fantastic conversation, and I'm happy to do it next month again. It's always fun to bounce around ideas. It's always fantastic. I do think, and this is pulling from what everyone's kind of said, and that is, take the moment to learn from this and then adapt when you do go back, right? Don't rush back to the way it was before in the hopes that the economy is just going to be like it was before. There are lessons you've learned now. You need to take them forward with you. You need to be stronger, more resilient, moving forward in a better position. I do worry, and again, I'm in the security field, I do worry that there's going to be this, well, we need to focus on everything that is revenue generating, and therefore we're going to cut security budgets. The attackers are hoping you do that too. I was very focused on the election in terms of another perfect storm for cyber events and cyber attacks, be them disinformation or disinformation coupled with cyber. COVID has been that on steroids, but I still think you have the election, you have so many of these other events that their attackers are going to take advantage of. So don't think they're going to rest on the other side of this. That is my one worry. And I think right now is a time where you will separate the leaders and the managers, right? All leaders are good managers, but not all managers necessarily are good leaders. And right now, leadership is what your companies need in terms of taking care of your people and staying focused on mission.
Hey guys, I think we're wrapping up here. I just wanted to give our host a chance, Sile here, to come back in and say a few words to all of us and somewhat wrap up the day.
Thank you. How are you folks?
Good. How you doing?
So I have loved all the panels, but I have to tell you, you've got me watering at the mouth now. So I don't think I met you before the panel started, perhaps just in brief, but absolutely brilliant. You folks are living this every day, anti-fragility, and you're helping society, be guided through the shocks that we experience, COVID and beyond. So thank you tremendously. Just absolutely tremendous conversation all around. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Si. I appreciated the opportunity to participate.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Success.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. If I could a virtual hug, if you will, all around, Marcus, Emily, James, and Bob. So thank you folks so much. All around. There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.